Hello, class. Today we'll be discussing the world's first ever civilization, Mesopotamia. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. By now, we should know the correlation between Neolithic revolution, farming, and the development of civilizations. Today, specifically, we're going to talk about the world's first ever civilization right here, right? Mesopotamia. This is the world's first ever civilization. And then, as you guys can tell from this map, we're going to then talk about Egypt to the left of Mesopotamia, and to its right, we're going to talk about the Indus River Valley. And finally, we're going to talk about ancient China over to the far right. And we're going to go in that order. Now, one thing that these all have in common is that they all began near rivers. What you're seeing here is a blown up picture of that same map earlier that shows us the two rivers that surround Mesopotamia, right? The Tigris River to the right, and then the Euphrates River to the left. And both of these rivers are important because they flood once a year, allowing for soil to be deposited that's good enough or ideal, for farming. And this is a perfect place to start a civilization. Each year, the rivers flood very predictably for the most part. And this place is known by a lot of different names. Obviously, Mesopotamia, which literally means, if we translate it into English, the land between rivers. It's also referred to as the cradle of civilization, or I'm gonna write it on this side over here, the Fertile Crescent. So on a quiz or an exam, you might see Mesopotamia, you might see the land between rivers, you might see cradle of civilization, or you might see Fertile Crescent. Understand that all of these names are interchangeable. They all refer to the same place, Mesopotamia, right? And this is it right here. And again, it's surrounded by the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. Mesopotamia is going to grow rather quickly. It's going to become a very attractive city. It's going to become a very attractive kingdom. It's going to attract the eyes of a lot of people, a lot of neighboring people, a lot of enemies. And as you can tell by the geography, it's not incredibly hard to invade Mesopotamia, right? Sure, you have the mountains to the right, and you have a desert to the left. And you have the mountains northwest, but it's not incredibly hard for an army to cross over through there, through here, through the sea. Even remember, sails already exist. We can do some sort of traveling through sea, not long distance, but we have the means to do so. It's gonna the lack of natural barriers is going to make Mesopotamia very vulnerable to outside attack. And even though throughout history it was invaded, Mesopotamia still left behind for us some long-lasting contributions that we're going to see in other civilizations in the next couple days. And off to the left here, you see the 5 traits, right? The 5 traits that make up a civilization. So we're going to go through Mesopotamia's 5 key traits of civilization. The first thing, right, obviously because they don't have the strongest natural barriers, Mesopotamia has to develop their own barriers by creating high walls, right, by creating these high defenses to protect themselves from invaders. Not only do they leave behind a blueprint, so to speak, as to or how to run or develop a city or a state or a kingdom, they also leave behind for us social classes. Remember, we talked about this pyramid the other day. Social classes is something that rises here in Mesopotamia. And this is because not everyone's a farmer. Remember, now that people have jobs, some jobs become more important, become more valuable than other jobs. Um, so they leave social classes for us, right? We have specialized laborers, specialized workers, and at the top were the kings. They also leave behind for us a very, very complex system, and detailed at that, of their gods. Everything you're seeing here in this box, in this white box, were the first gods or deities to ever be thought of in this earth. These are the original gods, so to speak. And they all stem from Namu, which is the mother goddess, and Anu. And these are your the most powerful gods in Mesopotamia. And from these two gods, you have a series of lesser gods, right? These people obviously worship multiple gods. They obviously made sacrifices to multiple gods. They were what we call, sorry, terrible color, polytheistic, meaning they have more than one god. They believe more than one god. More importantly, and more long lasting, is their government. Mesopotamia was the first civilization ever to create a legal code. They were the ones that gave us the idea of laws, and they were created by King Hammurabi. And Hammurabi created 282 laws based on justice and retaliation. Right? I'm sure you guys have heard this say in all your life: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. For those Spanish speakers, diente por diente. It's the same thing. Now, through the course of time, obviously and eventually, we go from these wedge shapes, right? These circles and these triangles and these fish looking things, and we eventually translate all that first to phonetic language, right? And then to Greek, and eventually we get English. Now, finally, and this is probably one of the more important ones, one of their most lasting contributions to the rest of the world was the technology. For example, the wheel. Although it seems very basic and very simple, it at the time was a groundbreaking invention. The wheel allowed for faster communication, faster trade. It allowed for so much, and we're still using it today, thousands of years later. All of our cars have wheels. We still use sails. We still have boats with sails. We have modernized the plow quite a bit, but we still do a lot of metal work, right? These are the things that Mesopotamia left behind for us, things that have lasted through generations. Every other civilization is going to borrow the ideas that Mesopotamia laid out for us. Technological ideas, cultural ideas, government ideas. They're going to borrow these ideas and run with it. They're going to make them their own. Now, when we transfer ideas from one place to another, we call that cultural diffusion, right? It's when we take ideas from one place to the next, from point A to point B. Cultural diffusion, very, very important word. You will see this. You will also see another very similar idea, technological diffusion. And it's the same. It's the same thing when we take ideas from one place to the next, but specifically relating to technology. For example, the invention of the wheel, right? The wheel was by the Sumerians. This wheel is later borrowed by the Egyptians. That is what we call technological diffusion. It's a spread of ideas specifically related to technology, from one place to the next. And that is it. That wraps up our video on Mesopotamia.